Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. Today I'll be breaking down Season 16, Episode 13, Part 3 of the one-on-one tell-all finale. This episode starts with Sukanya Krishnan, the host, asking Christine where her and Cody are at now. Christine makes clear that her and Cody are divorced and completely separate. She says they will just be friends eventually. She realized she had to make a decision from her heart and for her heart, and her heart was done being broken, and it felt freeing. Yes, yes, yes. Christine is going to feel so much lighter and happier, and I am so happy for her. I remember season 1 when Christine foreshadowed that some sister wives married into a family and they did it for the man and not the larger family, and how, unless Robin was amazing, it wouldn't work out, that the dynamic would upend, and now that has come to fruition. And her relationship with Cody has become increasingly untenable, and she has decided she can't handle and she shouldn't accept less than she deserves. Cutting ties with anyone abusive or controlling or even just slightly manipulative or emotionally manipulative, be it a father, a mother, a husband, a brother, is the most freeing thing a person can do. And it's not always easy if there are other interconnected relationships. In Christine's case, but she even suggested that eventually her and Cody could be friends, meaning just friendly enough for the kids' sake or the larger family functions. Despite what she dealt with, she seems to still be willing to attempt a neutral friendship with Cody in those situations. I don't doubt one day Christine can do that, but I do doubt if Cody can. Except Cody's in the hot seat, and he says, Christine, okay, so Christine's moved, she's left, and he clarifies that they're no longer married, and he has his hand on his chin basically most of the episode, as if he's a great philosopher pondering the meaning of life, and he says he loves her and he doesn't know what to do. He feels grief, but he's still angry. He'll take the grief for a little while to be out of the anger phase, and he's moving on, and he says he just wants to have a good life. He wants Christine to have a good life and find happiness. And he says, to be honest, there will be relief from the rest of the family. He's such a dick. I can understand grieving the loss of a relationship, but he also was the main factor in its demise. And the anger is anger because it hurts his ego. And he is such a bad leader. And it hurts him that he was such a bad leader now that one of his wives is leaving him. And he was such a bad husband that one of his wives has left him and is rejecting him. That's why he's angry, the ego blow. And Christine leaving goes against the way he perceives himself as the leader to be adored and respected and obeyed. When Cody says there will be relief from the whole family, he wants to dig at Christine and let her know they are relieved because it's easier now. You were an issue and now you're gone. We are relieved. We don't have to deal with you anymore. We know Janelle didn't feel relief. I don't know about Mary. Robin may have been relieved because when Cody is pissed over a relationship issue with one wife, he takes the negativity with him over to whatever wife he stays with. So most likely, in my opinion, the relief must be from Robin because we know all of the kids really, really, really adore Christine. Sukanya sits with Robin next. She asks how something like this plays out in the bigger family. Robin has so much resentment on her face and her tone when she answers. She goes, what a waste, shaking her head and glaring her eyes. Sukanya asks Robin for more explanation, and she says, cause there's two functioning people that could figure it out. She does her tears act again, apologizing for crying, shifting to a cry voice, scrunching up her face to milk those tears out, to just squeeze them out, but there are no actual tears. She doesn't see why it's an option to divorce when you haven't really tried to fix it. Should a woman try with a man who makes choices in the marriage with no compromise and no input from his wife? Should a woman try when there is emotional neglect and manipulation and no sex decreed by King Cody because he cited her relationships with the other wives and her disloyalty to his mandates as a factor? When a woman is getting less than she deserves, less than she needs, from her unbending husband who sees her not as an equal to him, but as someone who must accept his way, a husband who dispenses crumbs of conditional love and who extends his negative relationships to his wife, to the decisions he makes about their kids, like not attending Isabel's surgery, should she try to accept less, to accept being dictated to? Of course, Robin will take Cody's view, but it turns my stomach watching one woman try to make another woman feel as though she wasn't trying as a wife. She should be crying over Cody not trying and wonder why Cody treated Christine like less than him, giving her no say and no room for compromise. Needless to say, there's more fake tears, and she says she doesn't see why giving up is an option when you haven't tried to fix it. She keeps saying that over and over. Listen, Christine told Cody long ago that she was overwhelmed when raising the kids, that she needed help. She raised all the Brown kids while Janelle worked. She tried asking for what she needed from Cody many times throughout the marriage. He told her she had to figure it out and keep up her end. She was shit out of luck. During their anniversary trip, Christine wanted a crumb of recognition of their relationship as husband and wife, rather than bringing up the whole family constantly. She brought up wanting intimacy. There was no conversation or compromise. She mentioned her needs many times. She was ignored and dictated to because Cody never saw her as his equal. She did try from the start, and it's disrespectful of Robin, and it's disgusting behavior from her to try and shame Christine for not trying hard enough, for her decision to say enough. She's trying to paint a picture that Christine was so difficult. She was so lazy in making an effort and trying with Cody. She never even lifted a finger to try. She never seems to mention Cody's part in this or Cody trying harder, and Cody never being willing to compromise or acknowledge Christine as an equal partner. It's like she didn't matter, she wasn't seen, her feelings didn't count. No one can live in a marriage of conditional love where you do everything the husband's way with no say at all. She should be able to go to her husband and say, I need help, I need support. And he should find a solution rather than tell her, well, you signed up for this, do your part. I don't care if it's overwhelming when she raised the kids, for example. Robin has no idea what she is talking about, and as a woman, to see the manipulations and know how it is, and then say, well, Christine didn't try, that's unbelievable. And to say, in my first marriage, I tried harder than Christine, I tried more than Christine. If it's an unequal dynamic and an abusive dynamic, even if it's not physical abuse and it's just emotional neglect, only a fool would try and only a fool would stay. Loyalty doesn't mean accepting any type of abuse. Sakanya notes that Robin is angry, and she says she's frustrated and angry and devastated by Christine's choice. It's not Robin's marriage. She can feel however she likes about it, but to be angry, Christine doesn't want a sexless marriage or a loveless marriage where she is neglected and unequal partners with Cody and expected to obey. And she says no more, not enough, no more, enough. And Robin has the audacity to say that she's angry that Christine has decided to go. I thought Christine was her sister wife, and she wants the whole family, and she wants the sister wife relationships. But she doesn't seem to want what's in the best interest of her sister wife. She wants Christine to try harder to accept less than she deserves and less than fulfills her. And it makes her frustrated and angry with Christine that she won't try and stay, that she did what's best for her and in her best interest and left. Robin has a good relationship with Cody because she behaves like she needs him and depends on him, and she obeys him, and she makes her kids obey him as well. So Cody may be softer and kinder with her for now, but she should understand that the other wives aren't her, and they don't have her relationship with Cody where there's anything to try for. And if Christine feels it's best for her to leave Cody, if Robin really loves the family and she loves her sister wives so much, she will stand by Christine's decision rather than tear her down and accuse her of not trying. And she would understand that Christine has to do what is healthy for her and best for her and her well-being. And at the very least, she wouldn't criticize if she wants good sister-wife relationships and the family to accept her. Don't criticize another sister-wife's rightful choice to leave and try and shame her by saying she didn't try hard enough. She should be asking Cody why he didn't try, why he didn't compromise. She needs to understand the level of effort Cody gives her. He doesn't give the other wives necessarily because the love isn't there. So it's really effed up that she criticized Christine for not trying and for leaving. Robin says Christine is part of her big picture. I think Robin is just upset because things didn't pan out her way and the way she imagined in her mind. She married Cody picturing to be loved and adored by all, just as Cody loved her, and she expected to be close with all the kids as their fourth mom and be best friends with the sister wives where they do sleepovers and braid each other's hair. But she came in and Cody shifted his dynamic because he loved Robin in an in-love kind of way, and he just had love He had love for his other wives, but he wasn't in love with them. So he naturally wanted Robin. And when you love someone, you want to be with them and they want to be with you. But he had 3 other wives and all of his kids, and he had to leave Robin's side to fulfill obligations when his heart really wanted to be with Robin. And his ego kept growing. It was always there, but it grew like wild weeds because maybe because of Robin feeding it or the fame or because of being on a B-class reality show. And the less present Cody was and the more separated everyone's lives became, the more Cody wanted to control and be seen as the leader. But suddenly he received pushback, or what Robin called kickback, from his wives. And his wives realized they ran things fine alone. They didn't feel like they needed Cody so much or that they wanted his input. And they certainly would no longer blindly acquiesce to his demands. And Robin really seemed to picture everything kumbaya. She's angry at Christine because her leaving rips up what she wanted, and it rips totally apart her dream in her mind, and she doesn't care about the well-being of Christine or the family. It's about maintaining the image and the dream that she has of one big family, and Cody as the loved, wonderful leader everyone admires, and see, look how great polygamy is, how healthy, how beneficial. That's why she's angry at Christine, because it messes up what she had on her vision board. Robin then says her kids are part of my big picture. Really? When Isabel was recovering from surgery and she wanted to see her siblings and father so much, and the nanny was allowed in during the pandemic and she wasn't, was that really her love for all of Christine's kids? And she cares so much about Christine's kids, but she couldn't allow them to see her family. I also want to point out that Robin has 3 grown kids and 2 little ones, with everyone always home. So Cody and Robin and 3 grown kids can't handle the 2 little ones. She needs a nanny. But Christine was able to raise 7 kids at a time and do homeschooling, and she wanted help, but she wasn't allowed to get help yet. And Cody told her when she asked for help and said she was overwhelmed that she was breaking her agreement, but Robin gets a nanny. What does the nanny do? Robin says she has been wanting to have a close relationship with Christine for years, but divorce just breaks everything up and it's hard. Notice in Robin's response, it was all about how it ruined her big picture, how it affects her, not how it affects the whole family, and not even about Christine's well-being. And Christine is accused of not trying, and her decision isn't highly respected by Robin. Everything is about Robin. Janelle says that Cody and Christine got to the point where they tried and tried and tried, and they have tried a lot. They did counseling, and they realized it didn't work. Sukanya asks how the divorce will affect the dynamic of the whole family. She says it's been hard because you're pulling apart something that has been together for 25 plus years. So who you are when that who are you, when that no longer exists? Sukanya asks Janelle how it feels for her since Christine has been a big part of her life. Janelle says Christine has been a huge thing, and now she has figured out how not to take sides. And Sukanya asks Mary how Christine's divorce affects her and the whole family. Mary says she doesn't know yet. It's very new and she doesn't know how to feel, and she is still trying to wrap her mind around it because it makes no sense to her. Christine says she isn't just leaving a marriage, she's leaving a whole family and sister wives, and she doesn't know what it does to all of them and their dynamic, but she has to make a decision for herself regardless of that. And she wondered to herself many times, was she being selfish deciding to divorce and changing the whole dynamic of a huge family with so many people that it would affect? But she decided that she has to live her life for her too, and she wasn't present and she wasn't happy married to Cody, and it wasn't working anymore. Sukanya sits with Cody, who wants to set the record straight. He has his version of what happened in his marriage to Christine, and Christine has her version. She says there's a lot to unpack with it, and Cody says more to unpack than he wants to. Sukanya asks Cody if it's hard for Cody and if he questions his polygamy. He says he thinks some people are cut out for polygamy and some aren't. He's reflecting, thinking they have really messed things up, the call to be better than they are. He says they might work out, but he knows people and other fundamentalist Mormons and other polygamists who are doing a much better job than he is doing, and he wonders if there is a disconnect, if they are living in the same dissonance Cody has experienced. A clip is played to get Cody's reaction. In the clip, Cody says he told friends he didn't want to be an advocate of plural marriage anymore. Christine says it's hard to hear in that clip. Cody says in the clip that he's been nagged for years about the struggles in plural marriage. He says instead of rejecting Christine's complaints about plural marriage, he has opened himself up to them, and it's unraveled plural marriage for him and made him cynical about it. There's the scene where he tells his wives he stopped trying to unite the family and get everyone going in the same direction because he doesn't give a shit anymore. And Mary says in the clip that it's scary because she sees Cody as the head of the family, and for the leader to say, "I don't care anymore," then where does that leave all of them? In the clip, Cody says he's at a point where he sees the family as an obstacle to his own goals. And Janelle responds in the clip, and she says, she's looking at Cody like, "What the hell planet did you come from?" That they are all in this plural marriage, they agreed to it, and considering the family as an obstacle to his own goals is the most selfish thing she's ever heard. Cody says in the clip, "My wives say if you weren't in the picture, we'd still get along." And Cody is irate in the clip, saying that's bullshit. He's seen the women treat each other so shitty for so many years that he can't take it anymore. He continues saying that the struggles in plural marriage make him think it's a waste of time and that they embarked on an experiment that is a failure. When the clip stops, Cody is sitting with Sukanya, the host. He has his arms crossed, and people normally do this as a protective barrier instinctively when they feel threatened or unsafe. His arms are crossed over his chest, and he says, "Wow, that sums it up." He feels that way today, and he says he wanted his wives to love each other. His biggest anger with his wives is the way they treat each other. He doesn't notice if they treat him crappy. He went years being treated badly, but he wasn't aware. But when he sees how the wives treat each other, that's a different story. And there was a wake-up call he had when moving to Flagstaff. That was if Cody was out of the picture, it would all be over. We already know Janelle and Christine get along well, and we know Mary has tenuous relationships with the wives because she was bossy and rigid in the relationship and in the way she wanted things in the beginning. And she wouldn't let the kids go through her place in the one house to get to Christine, so they had to go outside and up and down flights of stairs. And Cody is never too concerned with Mary. This isn't about Janelle, and we know Janelle and Christine are really close and they're really good friends, but we know it might be about Robin, and Robin wants them to love and admire her, and they aren't exactly rude to her, but they don't make any type of effort to grovel to her or to pretend to be her bestie. And Robin seems to want to be a part of the club, and Cody seems to be pissed that his wives don't love her the way he loves her. And she seems to be pissed, and that seems to be what the issue is with Cody, really. How Janelle and Christine accept Robin and treat her. He wants them to treat her like she's their best friend. And the reason he may have been treated like he wasn't perfect and his wives didn't do an ego feast for him is because of the way he behaves and his character and his emotional neglect and manipulations. And he also very clearly has picked a favorite wife. And if we remember the episode with when all the sister wives go to do a discussion panel on polygamy with anti-polygamists, the professor who studies polygamy from the episode I covered, and it's called Sister Wives on the Ropes, he said from his studies that the success of polygamy and the success of the family thriving and having a good dynamic depend on the type of man the husband is and the type of personality the husband has, and that the family should be well off, the sister wives should get along, and that the husband should never pick an obvious favorite wife. And the time that he shares between the wives should be equal. And we know that Cody doesn't do that. I think Cody is ego-driven, he's an asshole, and he has narcissistic traits, and he picked a favorite wife who gets the majority of the time, and he has one wife who gets the ideal relationship, the love, the attention, the presence, and the time. That wife, that favorite wife that gets all of that and gets fulfilled by Cody, is not going to be adored by the other wives. Janelle and Christine feel like sister, and Mary grovels at Robin's feet to maintain a feeling of family. So Cody wanted Janelle and Christine to be like sisters with Robin, but that's never going to happen. When Cody said, "You, the wives, are obstacles to what I want," what he wants is monogamy with Robin, and he's over polygamy, and he has been over polygamy. He actually loves Robin. He's in love with her, as much as an ego-driven person can be in love. And he naturally wants to be with her, but he has all these wives and kids that interfere with what his heart wants. So rather than being a man and saying, "I want Robin," he's going to try and be as negative as possible and deflect to his wives and kids, and he will systematically remove sex and intimacy and emotional connection and attention till the wives decide to go, because he cannot divorce them. He's already living as he wants with Robin, and he was fine maintaining polygamy if he was obeyed as a leader and he got to dictate how things would be. But as his wives operated separately, running their domains, he'd try to come in and still assert the old way and try to take over as leader, and he wasn't needed or obliged, and he got over it because it goes against his perception of himself as a revered leader, and he can't live like that. And that has to be the one, he has to always be the one in control with more power than his wives, and his wives are saying they want 50-50, and he's saying he can't do it. And he's mistreated. He calls that mistreatment and disrespect and disloyalty when he expects to be obeyed and he isn't. Then he blames it on his mean wives who don't include poor Robin. It's clear what Cody wants, either to lead unopposed with everyone adoring him and obeying him with no resistance, or to be in monogamy with the one wife he loves, who he wants to be with, who obeys him blindly, that he wants. And he can't divorce his other wives, but he can get them to leave him and neglect and manipulate and withhold and be less present and dictate and do pandemic mandates that are more stringent than the CDC until the women decide they can't do it. And I really think this pattern will continue. Back to Mary, she says it's rough and that this clip of Cody is not him. And she hopes Cody will find the strength to carry what he needs to carry rather than walking away. When Mary hears Cody talk the way he spoke in the clip, she feels done. Christine says regarding the clip of Cody that they struggled for a long time, and she's a plural wife and she's in the family because she is a plural wife. And they were struggling forever. So she took Cody's words personally that the wives are obstacles to what he wants. Sukanya said at this point when the clip was filmed, they seem to be in a fragile place already. And Christine says, yes, they were in a fragile place. And Cody was saying he doesn't want to do it anymore or try anymore. And she thought, okay, she was holding on to her last shred of hope she has left with wanting to stay. And Cody was saying that the family doesn't mean that much to him anymore and he doesn't want to try anymore. Cody tells Sukanya that Christine told him once that she hated plural marriage. And Sukanya asks if it was after she lived in Lehigh with Mary and Janelle in one big house and she had the basement. And Cody says yes, Christine said that she hated plural marriage and the lifestyle, and she was really living two lives. She was promoting plural marriage on TV and talking about how much she loves it and saying how she didn't want the husband, she wanted the sister wives and the family, but at the same time she was telling Cody privately that she hates polygamy, she hates plural marriage. Sukanya asks Cody how it makes him feel. And he says the mistake he made, he can look back on this and see it. He made the mistake of not saying, I'm sorry, I love you, and I validate what you're saying and what you're feeling. And he admits he didn't validate Christine because Christine hating plural marriage made him angry as hell. He says he got honest, and you have to look to God and ask, you inspired me, God, to do this, to do plural marriage, and why is this a mess now? And it makes Cody question the lifestyle. Sukanya asks Cody if he is questioning his own polygamy now. And he says, hell yes. Yes, he questions it all the time. He says he talks to women who struggled in plural marriage and the pain that it causes. And I do think polygamy is inherently a lifestyle that comes with a lot of pain and suffering. It comes with jealousy, iniquity, competition, and also unequal partnerships between the husband and wife. There's always going to be some type of hierarchy. And I also wonder if Cody understands that his wife's pain, it doesn't come specifically from polygamy alone. It does come from that, but it also comes from his behavior and the way he treats them. It's not just polygamy, it's also the way he treats his wives. And now he's trying to put all of the burden, deflecting it all to polygamy. And again, polygamy does inherently come with a lot of negative things, just naturally in the way it is. And it's not a healthy system because there are so many obstacles that are unnatural to cope with within the marriages and the family dynamics that the women have to cope with. But I also don't solely lay all the mess and all the blame and all the struggle in Cody's family and in the marriages strictly on the polygamous lifestyle. That is a huge part of it. But Cody is also at fault, and it doesn't detract from his fault that he's in polygamy. I don't think it fosters healthy relationships, but I also don't think that's the only reason that his marriages aren't working other than Robin. Cody's behavior and personality have a ton to do with it. Christine says she doesn't want polygamy, and that's for sure. She says part of the reason she's leaving being in polygamy and leaving being a sister wife is she doesn't believe in polygamy for herself anymore. She feels God knows she did it, she tried it, and she can go now. Janelle says she still believes in polygamy, and she says there was a point during the pandemic where she questioned if she wanted it. And there was a period where Cody was away for 6 weeks, and she felt life was much easier without him. And she really had to do a lot of soul searching, and she realized after that she still wanted to stay. Robin says if Cody doesn't love plural marriage, then what does he do? That's 3 of them or all of them, and that Cody would move on from. And she's seen that in their culture, where a man decides he's done with plural marriage, so he leaves all of his wives or all but one wife, and he starts a new life because he's tired of it. Mary says she's put in a lot of work, and Cody has too, and she sees the value in plural marriage, and she is asked if Cody still sees the value in it, and she says she doesn't know. Sukanya asks if in the faith Cody can give up on plural marriage, and Mary says anybody can do whatever they want. If Cody wants to give up, then he can. Sukanya asks Cody if all of his wives are still in love with him, and Cody says he doesn't know if it's about love and being in love, or if it's more about determination and commitment. He's not naive, but he knows he has a couple of wives standing on a bridge with a torch, wondering, do I throw this in the water or light this bridge up? Because there's no better awareness than reading the facts from the light of a burning bridge. But then it's too late, you can't rescue that. Basically, what Cody is saying is, with hindsight, once you end the marriage or the relationship, you can look back and have more awareness of what happened and what could have helped and made things better, but it's already too late. He says he's looking at his experience with Christine going all the way back to 12 years ago, with Christine saying, I hate polygamy, and he just could have validated her by saying, I don't like what's going on either, and I don't like what we're doing either. Instead, he became angry, and he felt righteous indignation, he says, and there was arrogance on his part. His first reaction to Christine saying she hated plural marriage was that he had been loving to her and that he was a good husband and that they did all this together. They had great memories and beautiful kids. And now she's coming to him saying she hates polygamy. He was pissed. And he says he should have agreed with her that polygamy was hard. He could have validated that, yes, polygamy is hard. It's very difficult. And I think what happened is that around this time when Christine was saying that she hated polygamy, the show started to air and they needed money, and the show was introducing the world to polygamy and they were hoping it would be in a positive light. So everyone was acting like they loved it on camera and the benefits, talking about the benefits of polygamy, trying to portray it in a good light, trying to portray a good image of polygamy. And they may have actually felt responsible to portray polygamy in the best light possible because the public basically saw polygamy as just the cult stuff, what's put in the media, the abuse, the defrauding for the government benefits, the child brides, when there are families who do polygamy as a lifestyle that aren't necessarily participating in that evil stuff. Polygamy inherently does come with a lot of negative for the women, and they do have to take less than they deserve, less time. They have to deal with competition and jealousy and sacrifice and on and on. But it's not all 100% all like the Warren Jeffs child bride evil type of stuff. But the wives still, they even in a good example of polygamy, they have to sacrifice a great deal. And so I think that the Browns really wanted to try and show the other side of polygamy, while internally the wives were struggling and Christine was struggling a great deal. And Cody wanted the show to succeed and to make sure polygamy was portrayed positively. And he had a wife saying behind closed doors that she hated it, while on TV she has to gush about the benefits. And Cody was pissed because he still saw it as a rosy thing back then. And his wives obeyed him and everyone, was still like towing the line. And to be confronted that your wife saw it differently than you did, and she is open with you, telling you she hates it, and you have the show where polygamy gets to be other than what was shown in the media in a more positive light, and the show has to work for the income it brings into the family. And it probably felt like a threat to Cody because the family needed the money and he felt a great deal of responsibility to advocate for polygamy and for the show to work out, and the show was mainly supposed to advocate for it. And Cody may have feared that Christine would speak up in public on TV, so rather than validate her, he really tried to shut her down, and he became angry about it. And that's just my take, that's just my opinion on it, and I may be wrong. I don't know these people, I don't know what goes on in their heads or behind closed doors, but this was when she was pregnant with Truly, who will now be around 12, if she isn't already, and around the first season. Cody wonders if he could go back, would he save it all by being empathetic instead of being angry? Sukanya asks if Cody thinks he would have saved the relationship had he been more empathetic to Christine. And he says, now we'll never know. If Cody had empathy, he would have never suggested his daughter, who was suffering in pain and needed the scoliosis surgery, fly alone to New Jersey to do a life-threatening surgery during a pandemic. He can't do it. He seems to have a very limited capacity to have empathy for others. What about how he treated Gabe during the scene where they were moving logs around and he gave him nothing back despite Gabe's clear communication and his want to have a relationship with his dad? How Cody treats his wives who are adults is still wrong, but the wives are adults and they can decide to accept what they deserve or not. But when viewers have to watch the way he treats his kids who look to him as a father for safety and protection and reassurance, that's another story. Sukanya next is showing a clip of Christine discussing moving to Utah with Cody and how he reacted alone with her when she was discussing it versus how he reacted when Christine brought it up in the group with all the wives and he seemed to suddenly change his stance on the matter. In the clip, Christine says she specifically said she would move to Flagstaff unless the laws in Utah changed, and now the laws in Utah have changed. Cody says to her when she discusses it privately with him that he wants to move to Utah, but he felt he couldn't entertain it. But now the idea excites him because he has friends there. He likes Utah. We then flash to the group of wives and Cody when Christine is introducing it, saying how polygamy is now decriminalized in Utah, and she wonders why they are still in Flagstaff when they can move back home because Utah feels like home, and she wants to move back. And Janelle immediately shuts her down. She says there is nothing for her in Utah. Cody says he's at a place now where he feels his kids love Flagstaff, and this is the place that his adult kids, would most likely move back to. But as we recall, remember when Cody was telling Janelle her kids that are 18 and over need to move out because they weren't following his rules? And he was telling her that once all the kids reach 18, he has done all he can for them. And that when he was 18, he was on his own and he expects his kids to make their own lives. Cody is now saying he wants his adult kids around him when it suits him and when they obey him. And if they don't want to obey them, he wants them out. But in this flashback, he thinks his adult kids are most likely to move back and live around him, and he's acting like he wants his adult kids around him, and that he thinks they would move to Flagstaff when most of them actually live around Utah. Christine is surprised by Cody's reaction in the group because she thought he would be more supportive of her, and he is acting in front of the group like they never spoke about it and like he never supported it. But to Christine, individually, one-on-one, he was more in favor and supportive, and then she brought it to the group and he told her no in the group setting when he told her he liked the idea one-on-one. Christine is crying at this point and she tells the group, "We aren't moving, are we?" And she's really, really, really suffering and sad, and she's devastated by this. So Mary takes Christine to talk and she puts her arm around her and tells her, "Just look at the mountain, just look at the mountain." And Christine says she doesn't want to do this anymore. She says she's tired of feeling like she doesn't matter, like she has no support when she needs it. She's tired. Next, we see Christine and Cody meet alone at Coyote Pass after the group conversation. And Cody says he felt he was cutting her off too harshly in the group discussion on Utah. He says he was trying to be stoic and he feels bad about it. He's sorry. Next, we see Christine in confessional, pissed, and she says, "What is this stupid word he's using? Stoic. Bullshit. He was an ass." She doesn't believe him that he's sorry. She says, "Why would I want to live on the same property having a dysfunctional marriage when right next door there is a full functioning marriage?" She continues, "Who in her right mind would ever want to live like that?" I just want to point out that as the clip is playing, they show Robin's reaction to the clip, and she looks like she wants to kill someone, and Cody also has a similar looking facial expression, just very angry and hostile and volatile. There is no empathy, not a shred of compassion. They both look like pure vitriol when watching it. And when the clip ends, Sukanya tells Cody that was hard to watch. And he sighs, then he giggles in a cynical way and says, and Sukanya cuts him off as he's thinking what to say. She cuts Cody and the wives off a lot when if she stayed silent and stared at the interviewee, whoever she's talking to, expectantly, and she just remained quiet, they would complete their thoughts and she'd get more out of them. And then she could go on to the next question. But anyways, I'm not the interviewer. Sukanya asks, is it really about Utah or about the relationship? Or her state of affairs with her sister wives? What is that about? And Cody looks so hateful at this point. He says, I didn't know she said that until I saw it now. And he says he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know she was saying that and that she didn't want to be married to him anymore. He says he'd heard rumors from his children that she'd been throwing it out there, and other wives told him that Christine had threatened to leave him, but he wants to know, why am I in the dark here? He's acting like he was totally clueless that Christine wanted to leave, but I doubt that's the case. He did the same thing he did with Mary, who had an emotional affair to Christine, and he did it strategically. He neglected her needs. When he's disobeyed, he neglects emotionally. Then he does no communication. Then when he does come over and give a shred of time, unequal time, he's not being present and engaged when he shows up, making love conditional only on if he was obeyed, removing intimacy without a discussion or compromise, and suggesting that Christine was going to get no sex ever because of her disrespect and the way she treated his other wives. I'm not sure why sex in the marriage was predicated on the way she treats the other wives, and I'm sure she isn't mean and a bully to them. Cody knew what he was doing. She went to him for help many times in the marriage, like with the kids early on when she was overwhelmed, and he refused, saying it was her agreement to take that responsibility regardless if she was overwhelmed. During the anniversary trip, he refused to acknowledge their relationship. He was willing to only acknowledge the bigger family, even when asked to make it about just the two of them by the therapist who accompanied them. When he goes on anniversaries with Robin, are they fucking like bunnies, making it all about them as a couple? Or do they sit and discuss the whole family endlessly during their anniversary trips? I wonder. Cody knew what he was doing. He wasn't clueless. This was intentional, and now he is playing, oh, I'm so clueless, like he was betrayed or blindsided by Christine leaving, and that isn't the case. Cody says that they're supposed to be taking care of their kids who are in Flagstaff, who like living in Flagstaff. And Christine threw out the Utah move like it was simple and easy and petty. And then she gets mad about it, and she rejects the way everyone responded by saying no, and she walked off petulantly. I think the petulant one is Cody, but Cody is watching the clip, thinking for Christine, she had her life completely controlled the whole time by 4 other people, and he can understand that. Robin says regarding Christine in Utah that she didn't know what was at stake, and she didn't realize that if she didn't move to Utah, that Christine was going to be done with the marriage. Sukanya asks Robin if she knew Christine and Cody were struggling at that point. And Robin says she knew there was some stuff going on, but it's supposed to be none of her business, even though it completely affects her life. And she's someone Robin loves, and Cody is also someone she loves very much, and it's very, very hard to watch. Sukanya asks why, and Robin says because it's one thing to be in your room, quiet and alone, thinking you want out of the marriage, and you don't want to be in the marriage anymore, and it's a different thing to say it on camera to your sister wife. Robin makes everything personal about her and how it affects her. She does her fake cry voice again, and she scrunches up her face with no tears, hand to mouth, and she says she had no idea that when Mary was talking to Christine and Christine was saying that she wanted to leave, that she was just sitting in her chair, chatting it away with Cody and Janelle, thinking that Mary's helping her, that everything will be okay, that everyone will figure it out. Sukanya asks if she feels like she failed Christine as her sister wife. And Robin says she didn't know it at the time when it was happening, but yeah, she does feel that way. She didn't know things were that serious. Sukanya asks Janelle about Christine, saying, over here, you have a fully functioning marriage, and why would I want to live on a piece of property when my marriage isn't fully functioning? And Janelle says she feels like Christine made a choice that she was never going to have a functioning marriage. She says she gets that sometimes you work and work and work, and you get to a place where it doesn't work, and that's okay. Janelle says by this point, Christine had already decided that she would move, and it's a choice to label your marriage as non-functioning, a never going to be functioning relationship, and that says a lot. Sukanya asks Cody, were you not in tune to what Christine was feeling and how she needed him? And Cody answers, well, yes. He says, oh man, she's been complaining from the time they moved to Vegas, so that's 9 or 10 years of complaining. She's complained about everything in their lives. He says, remember years ago, she did not like her life anymore, and this is a singular moment that has been building up for years since she said she hated polygamy. Sukanya asks if he'd been trying to help her, and he says He's been trying to make Christine happy all the time, and it's a constant burden on him. And there's just something missing, some problem, something going on. And it could just be polygamy that doesn't work for Christine, or it could be something else he doesn't know. I think plural marriage and what it comes with are a big part of it, but Cody's behavior also is a big factor too. He is putting all the blame on plural marriage and Christine hating polygamy, and that might have a lot to do with it. I'm not disagreeing, but he can't deflect all the faults simply on polygamy and let himself completely off the hook. His behavior and personality have a ton to do with it too. It's not just plural marriage. It has a lot to do with the type of man Cody is, the type of behavior he displays, the type of personality he has. But Cody admits here he wasn't empathetic, but he has a lot of other issues in his behavior and personality bigger than just empathy and his lack of empathy. He's owning just a grain of sand and deflecting everything else on the lifestyle and not really taking accountability here. Next up, Mary sits with Sukanya, and she says when they had the look at the mountains conversation, she thought Christine was just upset. And Mary says she thought she knew who Christine was and how she was and how committed to the family Christine was because of so many years together. So she went to Christine and said, "You're stronger than this. You're better than this. We have to do the work. And if there's a hiccup with Cody or a sister wife or any other issues, that Christine has to do the work." And it's really, really hard to look inward at yourself and look in the mirror and say, these are my issues and I need to fix them. And you can't put blame elsewhere. Wow. So Mary is implying Christine wasn't committed enough to the family and that Christine is weak and too lazy to work to fix the issues with her sister wives and Cody, and that she is putting the blame on Cody and the wives and on polygamy instead of looking at her issues and fixing them. So Mary is saying Christine has the issues that need fixing inside her and she needs to reflect on it, and it's all Christine's fault. I'm not surprised Mary is towing the line for Cody. Robin was angry and blaming Christine for not trying and also for ruining what she pictured in her head. Mary just tried to put it on Christine being weak and faulty and too lazy to work hard. Cody said keeping Christine happy was a burden. No wonder Christine is done with Cody and the family and plural marriage. Janelle is the only one in the family who didn't throw her under the bus or try and deflect to her or blame her. No wonder she felt unwelcome in the family. I also want to know, has Mary put a mirror up to herself? Does Mary understand just because it happened to be a catfish and not the man of her dreams, she still had an emotional affair and that she intended on leaving the family had the catfish been a real man? Has she taken responsibility that she actually was going to leave the family because that still was cheating, catfish or not? And last tell-all episode, she said she never intended to leave, but I don't believe that. Mary can't even admit to herself her own truths or look inward for herself, but she seems to eagerly be able to judge Christine and tell her to look inward at her own faults rather than to blame others. This is insane. It's so toxic, and I am so happy for Christine. Sukanya asks Christine, she says, "Here is this woman," referring to Mary, who is also in a relationship with Cody, "that could mirror your future if you stay," referring to Mary, who now lives still in the larger family, but as a platonic acquaintance with Cody, and Cody doesn't engage with her at all or call her or check on her, yet Mary stays. She asks, "Did you have a moment where you said, 'This is not what I want'?" Meaning she didn't want a relationship like Cody had with Mary. And Christine says yes. Mary told her that it was hard for them and how separate they were, like Cody and Mary in their relationship. And Christine said yes, and she will not have that, and she will not accept that, and she will not stay in that. Sukanya asks if it was the moment when she realized when they had the look at the mountain conversation. And Christine says, yes, it was that moment when she said, "No, I can't do this. There's no hope in a future like that." She can't even look at the mountains where she heard the angels sing initially. Christine says Mary meant to be all embracing, but it was a reverse for her. And she says, "God bless Mary. I know she tried to be all embracing, and she knows that it's not what Mary meant, but seeing Mary say, 'Accept it, accept a future like mine,' she knew she couldn't, and it had the opposite effect of what Mary intended. She doesn't want Mary to feel bad for trying to include her and embrace her, but for her, it was a wake-up call of no, there's no way she can do this any longer." In light of the separation of Cody and Christine, they play a flashback montage of the ups and downs of their 27-year relationship. Cody mentions in the clips the bolt of energy he felt when he met Christine. And Christine says she told Cody of all the guys she knew, she wanted to marry him. So Cody called her dad, who was the head of their church, to get permission to court Christine, and they married just 2 months later. I just want to point out, to really know a person, you have to really know them for a very long time. You have to know them mask on, you have to know them mask off, the good and the bad. You have to live with them and learn their habits, how they are under stress, how they are as far as compromise and communication and intimacy, and you have to build trust. 2 months of courting isn't enough. Not cohabitating before marriage isn't enough. But I understand some people have religious views that forbid that, but you don't truly know anyone unless you live with them. They then flash back to the Rock Tower fiasco with Nancy in Galveston, Texas for the anniversary trip, where Christine says she's looking for love, and Cody says, that's right, you are looking for love, and I'm looking for a solid foundation and structure. And he says, honor the entire family and I will love you. And in that clip, Christine says, everything is hard and it's hard to see the silver lining every day. So basically, Cody is saying, if you do as I want and you put the whole family ahead of your own needs and you ignore your own needs, then I will love you. If you do X, then I will love you. So it's conditional love and giving crumbs of conditional love. Cody says when you don't have trust, you don't have intimacy, and Christine noticed the lack of intimacy. And in the clip, Christine says she's miserable and jealous, and she didn't know that she would be a jealous person, and she is incredibly jealous. And next they show an argument when they were building the Derby cars in Vegas. And Cody asks, why are you not looking at me? And she says, I don't know, whatever, agitatedly. And Cody says, okay, I'll make the orders and everybody else just do it, just like a dictator would. And Christine replies, well, that's kind of how we have to do it anyway. And Cody says, then you'll have somebody to blame. Then the next scene is shown of Christine upset, and they're going to be hanging out with Ken, who was Cody's old Mormon friend, who told Cody he should leave his wives. And Christine took offense to that. And this is the scene where later on, Cody explains to the world how Christine's PMS is such a huge problem. In this scene, they show Christine wants an apology from Ken for saying that Cody should go back to the Mormon church and leave 3 of his wives in order to be able to. And Cody says this whole thing is driven by Christine's pride and he's pissed. We then see Christine saying she doesn't want to talk to Cody and she doesn't trust a word he says. And this is after he meets with her on Coyote Pass one-on-one to apologize about saying no to Utah in the group setting, even though he kind of encouraged it when they were one-on-one. Christine says the conversation isn't safe and she walks away. She says it feels like a crossroads and she doesn't know what to do and she cries. And after that clip, Cody reacts to it saying the reality is he didn't know Christine and she didn't know him. That when they got married, they didn't know each other and they had never seen each other in tough situations. So when they got married, it was a bad match. But within a year, he felt like it was magical because Christine lifted the burden they were struggling with so much in the relationship between Janelle and Mary, that he was in love with her for 10 or 12 years because she lifted that burden. So basically, because Christine coming in lessened his stress of the issues between Janelle and Mary, and she acted as a buffer and it fixed that problem for him and served him, he appreciated her and was in love with her until she became a problem or went to him with complaints. Sukanya asks if Christine was a breath of fresh air, and Christine agrees. He says yes. He says Christine was happy-go-lucky and she brought a brightness to the experience. Christine explains that she had always had to be positive and upbeat, and like whatever you need, a people pleaser, absolutely, she'll do whatever. And she didn't mind. She was fine with it until all of a sudden she wasn't. She realized all of a sudden she couldn't be the positive, helpful people pleaser anymore. She said she talked to her dad, who was very sweet and loving, and he asked her at what point she would start saying no. And he told her she always said yes to everything. And when he asked her, when will you start saying no? And she thought about it and she decided to change the dynamic and stand up for herself after that conversation with her dad. And Sukanya says the moment you started standing up for yourself, Cody didn't like that change in personality. And Christine agrees and she said Cody didn't like the change. Sukanya asks, he didn't hear you? And Christine says, Cody heard, but he had no idea what to do with it because she changed so much in the blink of an eye. That everything changed and then Cody withdrew and then she withdrew. Sukanya asks what therapy unearthed for her, what therapy peeled back. And Christine says it was awful. It brought up early stuff that never healed and stuff where she thought, wow, Cody holds long grudges way longer than I do. Stuff that she had already forgotten, stuff that shocked Christine that Cody was still stewing on. Cody says they got to a point where it was a great experience and then a struggle and then a great experience again and then a struggle. And then they ended up in Vegas after Christine told Cody she hates plural marriage, while she's simultaneously telling the world how awesome it is. Sukanya tells Cody Christine mentioned grudges, that Cody could never let go of certain grudges. And Cody says no, he doesn't hold on to grudges. No, and he's adamant about that. And he says if someone says he holds a grudge, they are full of it and they don't know who he is and they don't know him. Earlier he said he should have validated Christine, and now he is saying if someone, meaning Christine, thinks he holds grudges, they are full of it and don't know him. Cody is butthurt, and it's a hit to his ego for this woman he was married to for 27 years and had 6 children with, saying he carries grudges, and so now he wants to hurt her by saying she's full of it and doesn't know him at all. Yet before he said he should have validated Christine, but he's still invalidating her even now. How will his kids feel seeing him say on TV their mom is full of it and doesn't know their dad? He is mad she is outing one of Cody's faults, and his ego will not take it. A minute ago, he says he was at fault for not validating Christine, and it affected the relationship, and now he's invalidating her feelings again because his ego got a slight nick. He has no problem sticking the knife in, mentioning it was a burden making Christine happy. And here, just because she said he holds grudges, he gets super defensive. Cody looks constipated when he is waiting for the host's next question around the 29-minute mark, if you want to take note. He certainly is full of it. Sukanya says Christine told her that the moment she started saying no, not being the happy, like Christine that Cody liked, that he fell in love with, and the woman that lifted his burden, that relationship became a heavy lift for him. And Sukanya asks if it's fair to say that Cody can validate what Christine said. And Cody answers, we can sit and say the he said, she said till the cows come home, and that Christine has told the host things that he fundamentally disagrees with, and all he's doing now is defending himself. He's a victim who has to defend himself against Christine. Really? No. I think Christine is no victim. She's a strong woman, but if anyone has to be the victim, it's the other way around. She's right. The host, Sukanya, is right. He liked Christine when she was a buffer, ending the Janelle Mary issues for him. He loved her for easing that, and she was very differential to everyone and very deferential to him, and she was very agreeable. She was a people pleaser to keep the peace, but she subverted her own needs, and that's when Cody liked her. Cody loved her because she obeyed. She was easy. She was the people pleaser who gave up herself to not make waves. One day she decided she needed a voice. She couldn't just live to please others. And when she went to Cody having opinions and a voice, and she no longer was the one who eased his burdens, and now he had to compromise with her or make efforts, he wasn't willing to do that. She was convenient as the people pleaser and the burden lifter, and inconvenient as the wife who has opinions and a voice and won't yes everything. Cody likes convenience and ego feasts. When she stopped revering him as a leader and she made waves, that was it for Cody. Cody tells the host he doesn't want to talk about Christine anymore. He tells the host he's sorry, he's angry, but he's not angry with her. Sukanya sits with Christine next, and they discuss intimacy. Sukanya says intimacy is a strong foundation most couples need, want, and desire. And Christine agrees. They play a clip about Christine regarding the lack of intimacy between her and Cody. It's the clip of Christine explaining that Cody installed the door to her office when he told her he wasn't interested in any intimacy or sex with Christine, his wife, anymore. That Cody said it was because he didn't like her behavior, he didn't like how she acts, and he told her, we'll see what you do and how you act and if you can be a good sister wife. And she says, first and foremost, she didn't know she was being a bad sister wife. She didn't know she was being bad. And she goes on in the clip. So Cody gets to have an intimate marriage with his other wives, but not her. And she's expected to have nothing, no intimacy for the rest of her life. And she says it's over. Then the clip shows Cody saying, regarding Christine, telling him he isn't welcome to spend the night any longer if there's no intimacy. He says he doesn't know what it means, if it's a phase or if it's an awakening. The clip cuts back to Christine in tears saying she doesn't know what to tell her kids. She asks, what did I do so wrong? Through the tears, she gets out, I've always wanted a romantic marriage. And that's been so hard for so long. Christine feels like she doesn't have a choice but to move Cody's stuff out because she can't see it. It's too heartbreaking to be around his stuff and to be around him. And they show the sister wives and Cody's faces as they watch the clips. And Cody shows no emotion. Robin looks completely pissed, but maybe she's taking mental notes so she can learn how to cry more effectively on camera. This is what authentic crying from hurt and sadness looks like, when it's legitimate and it's really heartbreaking to watch. I am so proud of Christine, and I am sure the tell-all was incredibly difficult for her, and she never cried, not even once, and she never tried to fake tears for effect or anything like that. She's the only one who could reasonably have cried, and she's happy and free, and she is only seen crying in clips. Yet every scene with Robin and Sukanya, she's fake crying, scrunching up her face, trying to milk out non-existent tears, making every scene with her a cringe fest comedy. Christine goes on that it's hard to watch Cody with Robin and Cody with Janelle and Cody with his kids having better relationships when hers is over. Back to Cody, he says family members have told him that Christine said she was leaving, but he doesn't know what to think or say. They show Cody finding his shit packed in boxes in her garage, and he says he's been moved out of his house and he doesn't know why. He says he's ambivalent and he almost doesn't care. His first thought is this is his house and this is his stuff, and they never discuss this. His second thought is relief from the burden and the woe of a loveless marriage. The clip ends and Christine says it was the hardest time of her life and it was the hardest decision to ask Cody not to be around anymore. She says it was so hard. Christine talks about them not being intimate anymore, and Christine explains that they put a door downstairs and shut the door, and she asked Cody, are we ever going to need privacy or have intimacy in our marriage ever again? Will we ever have sex again? And he said probably not. Cody said he had never seen Christine's side of this. His perspective of that experience was that Christine came to him and said, we did this work on the house. Wasn't that for our intimacy? Because they installed the door. And he answered, no, installing the door wasn't about intimacy. It was just something they had to get done. It wasn't about intimacy. It was just a thing crossed off the list to do. She asked Cody, will we ever be intimate again? And he said, and he does a shrug of like, I don't know, or indifference, just a shrug, kind of a gesture. And he says, he never said no, that they'd never be intimate again. He says he was at a point where he wanted her to address the rumors the kids told him that she was threatening to leave him. He says the discussion she just had in the clip explaining that they talked about intimacy and that she asked if they would be intimate anymore. And he said no, that never happened with him. He never said they were never going to be intimate anymore. So now because the no sex comes across as manipulative because Christine mentions it was contingent on him liking her behavior and how she acted and being a good sister wife, and Cody knows that it's incredibly looks abusive and neglectful, he's going to say now that it never happened. So basically Christine was lying in her video diary or whatever. Christine isn't lying, and even if he gave an indifferent shrug, who wants to be with anyone in a marriage who isn't enthusiastic to be jumping in bed with you? Cody says although he never said they would never be intimate again, he didn't want to be intimate with Christine because he felt Christine was stabbing him in the back. Sukanya wants to know why Cody didn't reach out to Christine and tell her why he's hurt. And he said FOMO, fear of missing out. But that isn't what FOMO applies to, but okay, it didn't make sense here. Cody says if they had a conversation, he wasn't sure how frank they would get, and he didn't want Christine to leave. Sukanya asks Cody if Christine ever heard Cody say, I don't want you to leave. And he says no. Christine says she found out Cody wasn't attracted to her when they got married, and she thought it was terrible, but he told her he loved her now, so she thought that it would be fine, and then it became more and more apparent, especially in the last few years. Cody wasn't interested in intimacy or sex, and they had a completely non-intimate marriage. They wouldn't even touch at all. They wouldn't hold hands, nothing. There was nothing, not even a hug, she says. After he made it clear he was not interested in an intimate marriage or sex with her anymore, and he said he had friends who have marriages without intimacy and that the people in the marriage even sleep separately, like one on the couch or two different rooms, and she's not interested in a marriage where they sleep separately and they don't have intimacy. Christine told Cody, so you can have an intimate relationship with someone else, but I get nothing and you think it's fine that we have a marriage like this? Christine says it's insulting. It is insulting. And she asks, why would he expect her to stay in a marriage like that? I don't think he expected her to stay. I think, in my opinion, he wants Robin and he would be fine with his otherwise leaving. He did the same pattern with Mary, but Mary refuses to leave. He did it with Christine and she knew she wanted better for herself. Cody even said, "My wives can leave me, but I can't leave them." He also said, when asked about Mary accepting him as an acquaintance, that no one should accept that type of marriage. He made it clear. Sukanya asks Cody if it feels like you never thought Christine would leave. And he said he wanted Christine to talk to him about it and that she would want to go. He thought that if he said he wouldn't want to be intimate with her, that she would want to go to counseling. But then all of a sudden he found the boxes in the garage. Sukanya says, "But you said you felt relief." And Cody says he was shocked, but there was a balloon lifting when he saw those boxes. He says there's pressure in a bad relationship that is still intimate. He says it's a tough place to get to where intimacy is a duty, and he's well aware that it feels like a duty or an obligation without the tools to say what's going wrong. He knows where Christine has been for 10 years, for 12 years, for 13 years, and she has said she hates polygamy, and she's told other wives she was going to leave Cody or that she wanted to, and then to sit and do the dance in Vegas. He tried to work so hard to work things out with Christine. They did counseling, they had conversations, and he never felt like Christine was being accountable. The majority of the time, Cody deflects. He'll say something in one moment like he could validate better, then someone says something that doesn't inflate his ego, and he invalidates what they said, like with Christine. He blames his kids and his wives. He said his kids were exaggerating when they said he was away for 8 or 9 months. He said conversations between Christine and him that she said happened never happened. He's blamed his poor relationships with his kids on disrespect. He blames ridiculous things like Christine getting a massage or Gabe and Garrison for not being able to visit his kids with Janelle and Janelle's house, and for not being able to visit his kids with Christine or Christine's house. He blames Robin being the only wife to obey his mandates as why the time he has is split in an unequal way, and almost like he's in a monogamous marriage. He never takes any accountability, and now he is blaming Christine for not taking accountability. And this is the pot calling the kettle black. Christine tells Sukanya she's done pretending. She's been showing the kids that everything is fine and showing everyone that everything is fine, and she can't pretend anymore. She says that if Cody comes into her room, he doesn't want to be there, and she knows he doesn't want to be there, and she doesn't want him there. She says it felt good when he was no longer there. Cody says his biggest problem for the whole experience is that he's angry. He says, fast forward to this moment, and the grief has settled in the heartbreak and the awareness, and he says it's not that simple. He can't look at those moments and look back and say, oh, I regret, because there's so much pain in the 10 years before. Sukanya asks what Cody wishes for Christine, and Cody says he hopes she gets married, has a wonderful relationship, he hopes she's happy. My question is, why would Christine have to have a husband or a relationship in order to be happy? She might want that, but she might also want to be alone. She might be happiest alone. It was so odd when Cody said, I hope she gets married. Can a woman not be happy alone without a relationship? He probably thinks for a woman to have meaning or happiness, she needs a relationship or a husband. Sukanya asks Christine what her future looks like, and she says she's dating herself now, getting to know herself better, and she wants to figure out her awesome life and be present in it and love it, and she feels light, and she didn't know life could feel like this. I am so happy for Christine, and she has evolved and grown so much. I love how strong she is, and she really is a very nurturing mom, and the kind of mom most people would wish to have, and I really admire her, and I really, really, really wish Christine the best. I'd love for Christine to do a spin-off show, and she deserves really whatever she aspires to. Robin says they are still one big happy family, although her tone screams the opposite and it's filled with resentment. But she says Christine gets to find somebody she really loves or whatever. Those were her words. Now Christine gets to find somebody she really loves or whatever. Why are Cody and Robin assuming Christine needs to have a man to be happy? I think it's so weird. Robin said she gets to find somebody she loves or whatever. So dismissive and resentful. No wonder Janelle had to tell her she has to think about having a sister-wife friendship or relationship with her. Robin says we'll just make the family bigger by adding Christine and her imaginary new husband she must have in order to be happy. Janelle says it's weird not having Christine in the family, and she has a new group text thread with Cody, Robin, Mary, and herself minus Christine. And they've had conversations about the property with just the 4 of them, and it feels to Janelle like someone is missing. She doesn't know if it's sunk in yet that Christine is gone. Sukanya asks Janelle if it hurts, and she says She feels like Christine leaving was a good move because Christine is happier, a lot happier, and Janelle can't be sorry for something Christine is so happy about. Aw, see, that's like sisters or the ideal sister-wife connection. Janelle misses Christine, but she isn't hurt by her departure because she is happy to see Christine happy. She cares about Christine's happiness and well-being, and it makes her happy to see Christine happier. She hasn't blamed Christine for not trying like Robin, who is angry and says it won't be like what she pictured in her mind. She hasn't told Christine she needs to look inward at herself rather than blaming others, and she should work harder to fix relationships like Mary. I was appalled by the things Mary and Robin said this episode. Cody says he looks forward to healing and coming to a place of friendship with Christine. Their marriage experience is over. He wants her to be well and to be happy, but he is still in a grieving process now. Sukanya asks Christine if Christine could look at the person she used to be today, what would she say to her? She says she could look back and say, I could have done this or Cody could have done that, but she's not that person anymore, nor does she want to be. She doesn't know what she would have said because she's not that person. She's here now. I am so proud of Christine. She's a strong woman, a great mother full of nurturing and compassion, beautiful, vibrant, and strong, and seeing her evolution is an inspiration to all women. Needless to say, I'm a huge fan. That does it for this episode of Sister Wives with Mary Jane K. I'll be covering season 1, episode 2 next, since I've already covered the pilot episode, and I'll move on from there consecutively, other than the episodes in random seasons that I've already covered. And I'll cover all new episodes in the new season as well. I'll also cover 90 Day on 90 Day with Mary Jane K, my other channel. Also continue coverage of adults adopting adults and anything else that crosses my mind that I would like to cover. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comment box. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love the dialogue. See you guys in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. I'll see you guys later. Bye.